I used to sleep through anything, diesel engines, ice machines coughing, even the paper-thin walls of highway motels. Then the kids knocked in Amarillo, and I learned what silence actually is. This is for whoever still thinks the stories are cute, and for Dr. Ahmed, my therapist, who keeps telling me to write it down so it has somewhere to live besides 2 a.m. I was 3 days into a run installing point-of-sale terminals between Dallas and the New Mexico line, just me, a battered gray toolbox, and a corporate per diem that smelled like bleach and regret. The motel sign kept buzzing between vacancy and ACY, like the V and N were too tired to show up. Room 217 smelled like coin laundry and old smoke, but the deadbolt worked, and I had a door I could put my back to. I ate gas station jerky over the sink, texted a photo of the day's receipts to accounting, and fell asleep to the window unit's growl. At 2:13 a.m., the AC stopped mid-breath. You notice silence differently in those rooms, the interstate hush, the ice machine's coppery clunk, the absence of any neighbor's TV leaking laughter through the drywall. What I heard instead was a knock like a metronome, 3 taps, patient, then nothing. I sat up, disoriented, bare feet planted on questionable carpet, and listened for the second set. It came, 3 taps, same spacing, the kind of rhythm you only get from a classroom wall clock or someone counting in their head. I checked the peephole and saw empty hall, no shadow at the sill, no silhouette against the sodium light pooling from the parking lot. Then a voice, small and too polite for the hour, "Sir, could you please open the door?" I hate that my first thought was liability, the way motel managers warn you about letting anyone in after midnight, the way my company's travel handbook has a bullet point about scams involving crying kids. But there it was again, closer to the hinge this time. "Please, sir." I said, "Through the door, front desk is closed, kiddo." "You okay? Where's your mom?" No answer first, then a different voice, same pitch, like reading from the same page, "May we come inside?" I put the chain on and cracked it an inch, exactly 1 inch, because some part of me believed rules mattered to whatever stood there. 2 kids in thrift store coats, maybe 8, maybe 11, hair too neat for 2 a.m., stood shoulder to shoulder like siblings at a school photo. They didn't smile, didn't fidget, didn't blink. Their eyes were the reason the hallway felt colder than the room, whole irises swallowed, pupil to sclera, like polished river stones steeped in ink. I've seen blackout contacts on Halloween, I've installed cameras in bars where every third person is trying to look like a demon for Instagram. This wasn't that. The girl tilted her head like a bird hearing a wire hum. She said my middle name the way only teachers and mothers do, Lee. I didn't breathe for a count of 4 because there was no reason those 2 in a nowhere hallway should know anything beyond the number on the door. My wallet with my ID was on the dresser, my phone was face down on the Bible. The only people who use my middle name are debt collectors and my mother's been dead 6 years. "Who told you that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice in the register that doesn't get you sued later. The boy said, "We are cold." They didn't shiver. It was 68 in the hallway. I know because the motel had one of those box thermostats near the ice closet, and I fix things for a living, which means I notice the dumb details that never help when they should. The girl said, "You should let us in," like reciting a line, then added, with the tiniest frown of correction, "Lee." I shut the inch. The chain made that nickel-on-nickel sound I always trust more than a deadbolt. From the parking lot came the faraway roar of a semi starting, then nothing again, like the world was exhaling in stages. I dialed the front desk, the line clicked but never rang. My phone lit as if an incoming call were fighting with a dead battery, the screen flashed mom for a fraction of a second, the way a name can be a reflex your phone has long after the person's gone. I let it time out and stared at the wood where the chain pressed. The boy put his fingertips on the gap like he could feel the thought on my side of the door. "We have to come in," he said, not pleading, not threatening, just stating a rule like, no running by the pool. I said, "No, you don't," and felt mean for saying it to faces that shape. He glanced at the painted cinder block and then right back at me without moving his neck, which is a motion you see in birds and not in kids who've spent a day on a school bus. "We'll be quick," the girl said. She recited my childhood street like an address label. You lived on Renford Drive. She said the color of my first bike and the number of my locker from 7th grade. That last one made me grip the door because I never told anyone I still remember that number. We tell ourselves secrets fall off our backs when we grow up. Nobody tells you some secrets just find new doors. I said, okay, this isn't funny, and reached to close the inch completely. The boy pressed the wood with the pads of 2 fingers and whispered, not loud enough for anyone at the next room to hear, but loud enough to echo inside my head, Lee, please. The chain dipped like something heavier than hands leaned, the overhead light flickered, and the AC tried a breath it couldn't finish. I slid the deadbolt home and put my shoulder to the wood like I was bracing a hospital door while someone coded on the other side. The chain dug into the jamb. My hand went to the gray toolbox out of muscle memory, found the flathead I always used to pop faceplates, and I ran the screws in the chain bracket until the cheap brass squealed. The boy's fingers never moved. The girl tilted her chin as if listening to something behind me, not through the door but inside the room itself. Guys, I said, switching to the tone you use on skittish customers and toddlers, I'm calling the police. Sit on the bench by the ice machine. I'll wave them down. We cannot be here, the girl said, the slightest crease finally showing in the skin between her brows. We have to come inside. You have to be somewhere else, I said, but even my sarcasm sounded thin inside that cold. I dialed 911. The speaker clicked, and instead of a ring I got dead air that wasn't empty. It had a low, wet hiss, like microphone breath. Then a voice that wasn't a voice said, please state your middle name for quality assurance. The prompt was wrong, like someone had shuffled IVR scripts and the polite robot had grown teeth. I hung up. Tried again. The same phrase came, but this time in my mother's exact cadence. If you've lost a parent, you know how fast your bones answer when their voice shows up where it shouldn't. I set the phone face down, like that would starve it. The kids didn't knock. They simply waited, and waiting is worse than pounding when you are the only person awake on a hallway of doors. I went to the bathroom. The mirror had that Motel scallop edge that traps old toothpaste in the bevel. I ran the tap, filled a glass, and swallowed half so I'd have something to do besides listen. When I lifted my eyes, the room behind me was wrong by an inch, the curtains moved, but the AC was dead and the window was shut, the bedspread had one fold too many, the Bible on the dresser had crept an inch closer to my phone. I turned around slow and the items were back where I remembered them. The mind catalogs rooms as a way to feel safe. Mine was filing bad entries, or someone else was editing the card catalog. The window in the bathroom had the kind of aluminum latch that chews your thumb. I slid it, lifted. The paint held the pane like a stubborn tooth. I levered with the flathead, felt it break, and dragged the sash up until air cut my shins. The parking lot was an L of sodium pools and bad landscaping. A Coke truck slept by the office. No one walked. An empty stroller sat under the stairs like a question. Something tapped the mirror behind me, not loud, not forceful, just the idea of a tap. I turned. The bathroom light dimmed as if someone had walked under a street lamp outside. In the mirror, over my right shoulder, the girl stood just inside the room, hands at her sides, eyes like black water. I spun around, heart in my throat. The room was empty. But when I looked back, the reflection still held her, a long half-second late, like she'd been in there and the glass hadn't caught up to the fact that she was gone. I slammed the window and locked it. The latch scraped my skin and drew a line of blood, a thin red you normally don't notice, this time it gleamed like it had stage lights. The tap came again from the door, 3 beats, and then the boy, Lee, we are getting cold. The trick with panic is to give it a job. I told mine to inventory. I snapped the belt from my jeans and looped it around the handle and the HVAC grate. I dragged the dresser over the threshold until the leg squealed. I wedged the chair back under the knob. Every crew I've ever worked with has a guy who makes fun of overbracing. I have always been that guy. The chain bracket I'd tightened with the screwdriver looked suddenly decorative. The peephole still showed nobody. My palm against the wood felt a chill leaking through like the door had been on a porch all winter. The boy asked, "Can we use your phone?" The girl added, "We will not take long." Their unison was off by a breath, the delay you hear on a bad conference call when someone's audio routes through a satellite. When you sell point-of-sale systems, you spend a lot of nights listening to people pronounce numbers through static. This wasn't that. This was two metronomes set to the same BPM with one spring sticking. My phone lit again. An incoming call showed unknown, but the thumbnail contact photo was my mother's hands, close up, flower to the wrist. I don't have that photo on my phone. That picture lives in a shoebox in a storage unit 3 states away. The ring tone wasn't my tone. It was the sound the motel's ice machine had been making since check-in, pitched up to human speech. I answered even though you never answer. "Honey," my mother said. "Let them in. It's rude." I hung up so fast my thumb hurt. Something moved outside in the parking lot and activated the motion light. I stepped to the curtain and pinched it an inch open. The girl stood in the pool of light under the balcony walkway, looking up at my window even though from where she stood you can't see the bathroom glass. The boy had not moved at all. There was no mother. There was no car idling out of frame. The Coca-Cola logo on the truck bled at the edges of the paint like I was looking at it through heat. The light clicked off. The girl's face remained the brightest thing in the lot for a second longer than the physics allowed. I tried the front desk again. This time it connected. The ring leaped straight to a voicemail greeting, "Thank you for calling the Flamingo Motor Inn. If this is about the room with the kids, please don't be unkind. They won't leave if you are unkind." The recording date was yesterday. I put the phone down carefully, like it could bite. Across the hall, a lock rattled and a man coughed. He cracked his door and said, reflexive and annoyed, "Take it up front, folks." The boy turned his head, just the head, no body movement, and looked at the man. The man shut his door like something had yanked it. A second later, his room went quiet in the way that means the TV and the person both stopped. I don't pray much. I talked anyway. "I can't let you in," I said to the wood, and to my left, and to the air above my shoulder. "I won't. That's a rule." Saying it out loud made it real enough to stand on. The kids didn't sigh. They didn't threaten. They simply waited like time was the thing being tested, not me. The TV power strip was on the wall 6 inches from the dresser. I used the screwdriver to reach the switch and snapped it on so I'd have more light. The screen blew bright blue, then gray, then black. Captions flickered without audio, "Hello, Lee." The remote lay across the Bible. The captions changed, "Please." Then, "Open." I unplugged it. The captions stayed on the dead screen for 3 more seconds like they had been burned there ahead of time. At 3:03 a.m., the fire alarm shrieked down the hall, a sound that makes everyone open their doors without thinking. I didn't. Smoke doesn't smell like pennies and cold pennies don't smell like anything. The hallway didn't fill. No feet slapped carpet. The alarm stopped. The kids didn't knock during it, they waited it out like they knew the length on the timer. I texted my boss, out of reflex to anchor myself to payroll and schedules, and the predictive suggestions filled the bar with 4 options, all caps, "Lee let USIN." I typed the alphabet instead, like forcing a machine to do something dumb would prove it was mine. The letters crawled slower than my thumb. The girl said, "Through the thin seam, we won't make a mess." The boy said, "We were invited." That one landed like an electric stamp. By who? I asked, and I hated how quickly I gave them the question. "You did," the boy said. The girl added, "When you opened the chain." I told myself an inch isn't an invitation. Then the chain lifted a fraction like a trick photo, the way perspective can make a horizon bend. Something pressed it from the hinge side, not the knob side, which should be impossible. "Lee," my mother said from the phone where it lay face down, clear as the day she taught me to ride. "Be decent." The hallway light outside my room went out. The emergency strip by the ice machine glowed red like an exit U-turn. The boys' fingertips left the wood. For the first time, I heard them turn away, and that was worse than their presence because absence is the shape you're left with. I thought they'd gone. The silence felt like someone holding a breath under bathwater. Then the ice machine coughed, and from the bathroom window came 3 delicate taps, polite as a spoon on china. I turned the faucet on full and sat on the carpet with my back to the door, belt looped, chair wedged, screwdriver in my fist like a priest who forgot the right prayer. My phone face down glowed through the Bible's thin pages. A voicemail dot bloomed, the preview showed a transcription of nothing but my middle name, repeated until the screen ran out of lines. I didn't answer. I didn't speak. I watched the motel art above the bed, a watercolor flamingo, fade and return with the power. At 4:41 a.m., the AC took a cracked breath. At 5:07, a truck downshifted and kept going. At 5:32, some brave bird tried a note and didn't die. When the hall lights relit, the carpet outside my door looked like carpet again instead of a lid. I waited for one more knock. It didn't come. The belt had dug a bruise into the knob. The chain lay exactly where I'd left it, which felt like a miracle even though I had installed half of it myself. I opened at sunrise. Cool air fell in. The walkway was empty except for a key card sleeve with the motel's pink logo and a line of handwriting that looked like my mother's. The word was Lee. It was printed by a clerk yesterday. I don't believe it. I put it in my wallet like the talisman you don't tell anyone you need. The office smelled like coffee that had been turned off and on all night. The clerk looked up from a magazine about bass boats and didn't blink at my face. "Early checkout?" he asked. I nodded. "They were at my door," I said, and hated that I said it. He didn't ask who. He slid a clipboard over, then pulled it back before my pen touched it. "Don't write your middle name," he said, like telling me not to sign with blood. "They'll try for it a different way." He tapped the bell, it made no sound. "You didn't let them in." "I cracked the chain," I said, because confessing is a reflex that feels like cleaning. He glanced at my hands, then the hall camera, then my hands again. "You closed it," he said. "That counts." I was halfway to the door when he added, almost friendly, "Don't answer if your mother calls while you're driving." I didn't ask how he knew about the flower on the hands. I headed west until the sky turned to highway. At a Love's outside Tucumcari, I stood in the morning wind and tried to feel like a person who slept. My phone vibrated against my thigh with a new contact card, created without me, Lee, with no number, only an address labeled home. The address was my childhood house on Renford Drive.